Block 1. The house no one mentioned. In March of 1884, in a small railroad town somewhere in the interior of the United States, there stood a building no one would have looked at twice. Dark brick, narrow windows, a crooked wooden porch, just another boarding house for passing travelers. There were hundreds like it across the country, but this one was different in one crucial way. After May of 1885, no one in that town ever spoke of it again. Not in stories, not in letters, not in old-age reminiscences. It was as if the entire community had quietly agreed this house did not exist and never had. Block 2. Amelia Winslow and 3 guests. The owner was a widow named Amelia Winslow, 42 years old in 1884, described in parish records as a woman of few words but respectable character. Her husband had died 3 years earlier in a railroad accident, leaving her the house and the business. She ran a modest boarding house, 5 rooms on the 2nd floor and 1 small cheap room under the roof on the 3rd. A local girl, 16-year-old Sarah Miller, helped with cleaning and carrying water. That winter, 3 guests arrived who would enter the registry but never properly leave it. Herbert Ellison, a traveling school teacher, thin, in his 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and ink-stained hands. He took room 3, overlooking the street, planning to stay 2 weeks until a rural school reopened. Emma Winslow, no relation to Amelia despite sharing the surname, a young woman in her early 20s, traveling alone. Stranded by snow, she took room 5 at the end of the hall. Sarah remembered her soft voice and her habit of keeping the door mostly closed. Charles, just Charles, a laborer with large hands and worn clothes, who asked for the cheapest room and was given the cramped attic on the 3rd floor. He paid a week in advance, coin by coin. After that, all 3 began to fade from the visible life of the town. Block 3. Disappearances without a moment. There was no single dramatic event, no cries in the night, no bodies, no official report of tragedy. Herbert was supposed to leave in mid-January when the school reopened. No one saw him depart the house, no one remembered him at the station, and no train log recorded his trip. Emma said she would continue her journey once the trains ran again. They did, in early February. One morning, her room was found empty, bed neatly made, belongings gone, window locked from the inside. Charles had paid for a week, but afterward, no one could say exactly when he was last seen. He was simply there, and then not there. Whenever anyone asked, Amelia's answer never changed. They moved on. On the surface, nothing more than 3 anonymous travelers passing through. But around that simple story, the house began to behave as if they were still there. Block 4. Lights, footsteps, and the wrong kind of silence. People walking past at night reported seeing lights in rooms that should have been empty. Not the steady glow of a lamp, but shifting, flickering light, as if someone were pacing with a candle in hand. It was almost always the same 3 rooms, room 3, room 5, and the little attic. Always in the hours before dawn. Sarah, cleaning on the ground floor, heard footsteps overhead when no one was supposed to be upstairs. Measured, patient footsteps, back and forth, like a person thinking while they walked. Each time she went up to check, the hallways were empty, the doors shut, the silence absolute. Back downstairs, the footsteps would start again. Meanwhile, Amelia kept cooking for 4 people, herself and 3 unseen guests. Winter visitors recalled the dining table laid out with 4 place settings, even when only Amelia was visibly present. If questioned, she would blink in confusion and say, "I have guests," as if the empty rooms upstairs did not contradict her. By March, the house itself seemed to repel people. Residents shifted to the other side of the street without quite knowing why. Sarah refused to return to work, telling her mother through tears that the empty rooms weren't really empty and that she heard whispers behind locked doors in voices she recognized. Block 5. The suitcase, the frozen rooms, and the vanishing address. On April 15, 1885, a railroad agent came to the house. A suitcase labeled Herbert Ellison had been sitting unclaimed at the station since January, tagged with the boarding house address. He knocked. No answer. The windows were closed, dead leaves piled on the porch. He left the suitcase by the door. Weeks later, it was still there, decaying in the rain. In early May, a merchant noticed there had been no smoke from the chimney for a long time. He and 2 other men forced their way in. Inside, the house was empty of life and of all personal traces. No clothes, no food, no items that looked recently used. Not abandoned in a rush, stripped. Rooms 3 and 5 and the attic room upstairs were locked from the inside. The men broke them open and found everything in perfect order. Beds neatly made, no signs of struggle. But the air inside those 3 rooms was wrong. Not just cold, frozen, as if midwinter had been sealed in and refused to leave. And there was a metallic, almost electric smell, like the air after a lightning strike. The men left quickly and reported what they had seen. No real investigation followed. Official records merely note that the property was closed, the owner absent. In the following year's maps, the lot where the boarding house stood was listed as empty. Neighboring houses had numbers, this place did not. Tax rolls and censuses dropped the address entirely. The building disappeared from paperwork the same way its residents had disappeared from daily life. Block 6. Fragments that survived. Decades later, in 1923, a black and white photograph of a small brick boarding house with a wooden porch was found inside an old book donated to a state library. No caption, no location, just a faded date on the back, March 1884. Researchers tried to match the building to real towns with similar rail history and layout. None had a house that fit. In 1947, an amateur historian named Thomas Ridley, studying railroad archives, found an entry in a conductor's log dated February 1885. Unscheduled stop at Ashford Station. Passengers reported 3 figures standing on the platform at 3 a.m. When train stopped, platform empty. No record of passengers waiting to board. Continued without explanation. A later note added, phenomenon reported 3 more times in following weeks. Always 3 figures, always at 3 a.m., always gone before full stop. Ordered not to stop at that hour. 3 figures, an older man, a young woman, and a laborer. Names are not mentioned, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Herbert, Emma, Charles. Whether they had finally managed to leave or whether they were trapped forever in the act of trying to leave, the logs don't say. Block 7. Erasure as defense. Modern explanations are easy to offer. Faulty memory. Gas leaks causing hallucinations. Lost records in a careless era of paperwork. Stories amplified and distorted by time. Maybe Amelia moved away quietly. Maybe the guests really did leave unnoticed. Maybe the house was demolished and forgotten. But those simple answers don't sit well beside the deliberate patterns. The missing address, the systematic absence in maps and records, the near-universal refusal of locals to speak about the house, the repeated reports of 3 figures at exactly 3 a.m. In the end, the most frightening part of this story may not be what happened inside the boarding house. It may be what happened afterward. An entire town chose not to remember. They did not solve the mystery of Amelia and her 3 guests. They cut it out of their shared reality, from their maps, their documents, and finally their conversations. 3 people entered a boarding house in the winter of 1884 to 1885. None of them can be shown to have left. A proprietor vanished. A building was erased. And a community decided, silently, that the safest thing to do was to forget. If, listening to this, you felt a small, irrational reluctance to repeat the story out loud, you may understand them. Because every time someone tells it, that house, the one no one wanted to mention again, comes a little closer to existing once more.